Hello friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit in English, then you must like this video if you are visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel friends. In today's video. The movie we're going to talk about is called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I am going to tell you. I am also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, starcast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a 1988 American fantasy comedy film directed by Robert Zemeckis from a screenplay written by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman. It is loosely based on the 1981 novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary K. Wolfe. The film stars Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, Stubby Kaye, and Joanna Cassidy, along with the voices of Charles Fleischer and an uncredited Kathleen Turner. Combining live action and animation, the film is set in an alternate history Hollywood in 1947, where humans and cartoon characters, referred to as toons, coexist. Its plot follows Eddie Valiant, a private investigator with a grudge against toons, who must help exonerate Roger Rabbit, a toon framed for murder. Walt Disney Pictures purchased the film rights for the story in 1981. Price and Seaman wrote 2 drafts of the script before Disney brought in executive producer Steven Spielberg and his production company, Amblin Entertainment. Zemeckis was brought on to direct, and Canadian animator Richard Williams was hired to supervise the animation sequences. Production was moved from Los Angeles to Elstree Studios in England to accommodate Williams and his group of animators. While filming, the production budget rapidly expanded, and the shooting schedule ran longer than expected. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was released through Disney's Touchstone Pictures banner in the United States on June 22, 1988. The film received critical acclaim for its visuals, humor, writing, performances, and groundbreaking combination of live action and animation. It grossed over $351 million worldwide, becoming the second highest-grossing film of 1988, behind Rain Man. It brought a renewed interest in the golden age of American animation, spearheading modern American animation and the Disney Renaissance. 8. It won 3 Academy Awards for Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects, and received a Special Achievement Academy Award for Williams' animation direction. In 2016, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Plot. In 1947, Los Angeles, animated cartoon characters, or toons, coexist with humans, often employing their skills to entertain as film stars. Private Detective Eddie Valiant, once a staunch ally of the toons alongside his brother and co-worker Teddy, has become a depressed alcoholic following Teddy's murder by an unknown toon 5 years earlier. Maroon Cartoon Studios owner R.K. Maroon, upset about the recent poor performance of his toon star Roger Rabbit, hires Eddie to investigate rumors that Roger's glamorous toon wife, Jessica, is having an affair with Marvin Acme, owner of both the Acme Corporation and Toontown, the animated metropolis in which toons reside. After watching Jessica perform at the Ink and Paint Club, Eddie secretly photographs her and Acme playing patty cake. He shows the pictures to Roger, who becomes distraught and flees, refusing to believe Jessica was unfaithful. The next morning, Acme is found murdered, and evidence at the scene implicates Roger as a suspect. Eddie meets Judge Doom, the sinister human judge of Toontown, having bribed the electorate to gain their votes, and his 5 weasel minions, the Toon Patrol. Doom confirms he plans to execute Roger using the dip, a chemical concoction of acetone, benzene, and turpentine, which is capable of destroying the otherwise invulnerable toons. Roger's toon co-star, Baby Herman, suggests to Eddie that Acme's missing will, which supposedly bequeaths Toontown to the toons, may have been the killer's true motive. Eddie returns to his office and finds Roger waiting. Roger insists he has been framed, and Eddie reluctantly agrees to help, after finding evidence of Acme's will. He hides Roger in a bar tended by his girlfriend, Dolores. Jessica tells Eddie that Maroon threatened Roger's career unless she posed for the compromising photos. Meanwhile, Dolores' research uncovers that Cloverleaf Industries recently bought the city's Pacific Electric Railway system and will purchase Toontown at midnight unless Acme's will is found. Doom and the Toon Patrol find Roger, but he and Eddie escape with help from Benny, a Toon taxicab. Sheltering in a local movie theater, Eddie sees a newsreel of Maroon selling his studio to Cloverleaf. While Eddie goes to the studio to interrogate Maroon, Jessica abducts Roger. Maroon denies involvement in Acme's murder, admitting he intended to blackmail Acme into selling his company, as otherwise Cloverleaf would not buy the studio. Maroon is assassinated, and Eddie spots Jessica fleeing the scene. Assuming she is the assailant, he reluctantly follows her into Toontown, choosing to discard the last of his alcohol. After saving Eddie from being shot by Doom, Jessica reveals her actions were to ensure Roger's safety, and it was Doom who killed Acme and Maroon. Acme gave his will to Jessica for safety, but when she examined it, the paper was blank. Doom and the Toon Patrol captured Jessica and Eddie, bringing them to Acme's factory. Doom reveals he is the sole shareholder of Cloverleaf and plans to erase Toontown with a dip-spraying machine so he can build a freeway in its place and decommission the railway system to force people to use it. When Roger unsuccessfully attempts to save Jessica, the couple is tied onto a hook in front of the machine's sprayer. Eddie distracts the weasels by performing a comedic vaudeville act full of pratfalls, causing them to die of laughter before he kicks their leader into the dip. Doom is flattened by a steamroller while fighting with Eddie, but he survives, revealing he is actually a disguised Toon and Teddy's murderer. Struggling against Doom's Toon abilities, Eddie empties the machine's dip supply, spraying and dissolving Doom to death. The machine crashes through the wall into Toontown, where it is destroyed by a passenger train. As police and Toons gather at the scene, Eddie realizes that Acme's will was written on the blank paper in temporarily invisible ink, confirming the Toons inherit Toontown. Having regained his sense of humor, Eddie happily enters Toontown alongside Dolores, Roger, Jessica, and the Toons. Cast live-action cast: Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant, a private investigator; Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom, a judge of the Toontown Superior Court; Stubby Kaye as Marvin Acme, the owner of the Acme Corporation and Toontown; Joanna Cassidy as Dolores, a bar waitress who is friends with Eddie; Alan Tilvern as R.K. Maroon, the head of Maroon Cartoons; Richard LaParmentier as Liz Santino, a police lieutenant of the Los Angeles Police Department; Richard Ridings as Angelo, a patron at the bar that Dolores works at, who mocks Eddie's detective work; Joel Silver as Raoul; Paul Springer as Augie; Mike Edmonds as Stretch; Betsy Brantley as Jessica Rabbit's performance model; Morgan Deere as an editor. Voice cast: Charles Fleischer as Roger Rabbit, a rabbit and cartoon short star; Benny the Cab, a Toon taxicab; Greasy, the second in command of the Toon Patrol; Psycho, a member of the Toon Patrol; Kathleen Turner, speaking voice; and Amy Irving, singing voice, as Jessica Rabbit, both uncredited, a human Toon and Roger's wife; Lou Hirsch as Baby Herman, a baby and Roger's co-star, who speaks normally when off-set; David Lander as Smartass, the leader of the Toon Patrol; Fred Newman as Stupid, a member of the Toon Patrol; June Foray as Wheezy, a member of the Toon Patrol; Lena Hyena, an unattractive Toon human whom Eddie mistakes for Jessica; Mel Blanc, Bugs Bunny; Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Tweety; Sylvester the Cat; Joe Alaskey as Yosemite Sam; Wayne Allwine as Mickey Mouse; Tony Anselmo as Donald Duck; Tony Pope, Goofy, Big Bad Wolf; Mae Questel as Betty Boop; Rush Taylor as Minnie Mouse, the Hummingbirds from Song of the South; Pat Buttram, Jim Cummings imitating Andy Devine, and Jim Gallant imitating Walter Brennan as Eddie's Toon Bullets, which he once received from Yosemite Sam; Les Perkins as Mr. Toad from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad; Mary T. Radford as Hyacinth Hippo from Fantasia; Nancy Cartwright as a Toon Shoe who gets dissolved in dip; Cherry Davis as Woody Woodpecker; Morgan Deere as Bongo the Gorilla, the bouncer of the Ink and Paint Club; Peter Westy as Pinocchio; Frank Welker as Dumbo, uncredited; Richard Williams as Droopy; April Winchell as Mrs. Herman, and Baby Herman's Baby Noises. Archival recordings of Frank Sinatra were used for The Singing Sword, whose character design is based on Sinatra. Production, development. Walt Disney Productions purchased the film rights to Gary K. Wolfe's novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit, shortly after its publication in 1981. Ron W. Miller, then president of Disney, saw it as a perfect opportunity to produce a blockbuster. Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman were hired to write the script, penning 2 drafts. Robert Zemeckis offered his services as director in 1982, but Disney declined as his 2 previous films, I Want to Hold Your Hand and Used Cars, had been box office bombs. Between 1981 and 1983, Disney developed test footage with Darrell Van Citters as animation director, Paul Reubens voicing Roger Rabbit, Peter Renaday as Eddie Valiant, and Rushy Taylor as Jessica Rabbit. The project was revamped in 1985 by Michael Eisner, the then new CEO of Disney. Amblin Entertainment, which consisted of Steven Spielberg, Frank Marshall, and Kathleen Kennedy, were approached to produce Who Framed Roger Rabbit alongside Disney. The original budget was projected at $50 million, which Disney felt was too expensive. The film was finally greenlit when the budget decreased to $30 million, which at the time would have still made it the most expensive animated film ever produced. Walt Disney Studios chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg argued that the hybrid of live action and animation would save Walt Disney feature animation. Spielberg's contract included an extensive amount of creative control and a large percentage of the box office profits. Disney kept all merchandising rights. Spielberg convinced Warner Bros., Fleischer Studios, Harvey Comics, King Features Syndicate, Felix the Cat Productions, Turner Entertainment, and Universal Pictures, Walter Lantz Productions to lend their characters to appear in the film with, in some cases, stipulations on how those characters were portrayed. For example, Disney's Donald Duck and Warner Bros. Daffy Duck appear as equally talented dueling pianists, and Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny also share a scene. Apart from the agreement, and some of the original voice artists reprising their roles, Warner Bros. And the various other companies were not involved in the production of Roger Rabbit. Executives at Warner Bros. Were displeased by animators using the Daffy design by Bob Clampett and demanded they use the design by Chuck Jones. In response, Zemeckis had separate artists animate Daffy using Jones' design to satisfy Warner Bros. In order to have Clampett's design in the final film. The producers were unable to acquire the rights to use Popeye, Tom and Jerry, Little Lulu, Casper, or the Terrytoons characters for appearances from their respective owners, King Features, Turner, Western Publishing, Harvey Comics, and Viacom. Terry Gilliam was offered the chance to direct, but he found the project too technically challenging. Pure laziness on my part, he later admitted, I completely regret that decision. Robert Zemeckis was hired to direct in 1985 based on the success of Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future. Disney executives were continuing to suggest Darrell Van Citters direct the animation, but Spielberg and Zemeckis decided against it. Richard Williams was eventually hired to direct the animation. Zemeckis wanted the film to exhibit Disney's high quality of animation, Warner Bros. Characterization, and Tex Avery humor. Casting. Harrison Ford was Spielberg's original choice to play Eddie Valiant, but his price was too high, $19. Chevy Chase was the second choice, but he was not interested. Bill Murray was also considered for the role, but due to his idiosyncratic method of receiving offers for roles, Murray missed out on it. Eddie Murphy reportedly turned down the role as he misunderstood the concept of toons and humans coexisting. He later regretted this decision. Robin Williams, Robert Redford, Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, Edward James Olmos, Wallace Shawn, Ed Harris, Charles Grodin, and Don Lane were also considered for the role. Ultimately, Bob Hoskins was chosen by Spielberg because of his acting skill and because Spielberg believed he had a hopeful demeanor and he looked like he belonged in that era. Paul Reubens originally auditioned for the role of Roger Rabbit and even provided his voice in an early 1983 screen test, but lost out. Eddie Deason, who had worked with Zemeckis previously, also auditioned to play Roger but did not get the part. The role was eventually given to Charles Fleischer. Before filming, Fleischer was asked to come up with a speech impediment for Roger. He gave Roger a lisp and the stammering catchphrase, "Please," as a tribute to all the other famous cartoon characters with speech impediments, which was inspired by Hunts Hall's Sack Jones in The Bowery Boys. He had invented the cheek flutter, while performing the voice of BB in Deadly Friend. His portrayal of Roger was also inspired by Screwy Squirrel. To facilitate Hoskins' performance, Fleischer dressed in a Roger Rabbit costume and stood in behind camera for most scenes. Williams explained, Roger was a combination of Tex Avery's cashew nut-shaped head, the swatch of red hair, like Droopy's, Goofy's overalls, Porky Pig's bow tie, Mickey Mouse's gloves, and Bugs Bunny-like cheeks and ears. Kathleen Turner provided the uncredited voice of Jessica Rabbit, Roger Rabbit's wife. Tim Curry auditioned for the role of Judge Doom, but was rejected because the producers found him too terrifying, 34. Christopher Lee was also considered for the role, but turned it down. John Cleese also expressed interest for the role, but was deemed not scary enough. Peter O'Toole, F. Murray Abraham, Roddy McDowall, Eddie Deason, and Sting were also considered for the role. Christopher Lloyd was cast because he previously worked with Zemeckis and Spielberg on Back to the Future. He compared his part as Doom to his previous role as the Klingon Commander Krug in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, both overly evil characters which he considered fun to play. He avoided blinking his eyes while on camera to portray the character. Fleischer also voiced Benny the Cab, Psycho, and Greasy. Lou Hirsch, who voiced Baby Herman, was the original choice for Benny the Cab, but was replaced by Fleischer. Writing, Pacific Electric logo. The plot incorporated the actual closing of Pacific Electric. Price and Seaman were brought aboard to continue writing the script once Spielberg and Zemeckis were hired. For inspiration, the two writers studied the work of Walt Disney and Warner Bros. Cartoons from the golden age of American animation, especially Tex Avery and Bob Clampett cartoons. The Cloverleaf Streetcar subplot was inspired by Chinatown. Price and Seaman said that the red car plot, suburb expansion, urban and political corruption really did happen. Price stated, in Los Angeles during the 1940s, car and tire companies teamed up against the Pacific Electric Railway system and bought them out of business. Where the freeway runs in Los Angeles is where the red car used to be. In Wolfe's novel, Who Censored Roger Rabbit?, the Toons were comic strip characters rather than movie stars. During the writing process, Price and Seaman were unsure of whom to include as the villain in the plot. They wrote scripts that had either Jessica Rabbit or Baby Herman as the villain, but they made their final decision with the newly created character Judge Doom. Doom was supposed to have an animated vulture sit on his shoulder, but this was deleted due to the technical challenges this posed. Doom would also have a suitcase of 12 small, animated kangaroos that act as a jury by having their joeys pop out of their pouches, each with letters, when put together, would spell, "You are guilty." This was also cut for budget and technical reasons. The Toon Patrol, Stupid, Smart-Ass, Greasy, Wheezy, and Psycho, satirizes the seven dwarfs, Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey, who appeared in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. Originally 7 weasels were to mimic the dwarfs' complement, but eventually 2 of them, Slimy and Sleazy, were written out of the script. Further references included the Ink and Paint Club resembling the Harlem Cotton Club, while Zemeckis compared Judge Doom's invention of the dip to eliminate all the Toons to Hitler's final solution. Doom was originally the hunter who killed Bambi's mother. Benny the Cab was first conceived to be a Volkswagen Beetle before being changed to a taxi cab. Ideas originally conceived for the story also included a sequence set at Marvin Acme's funeral, whose attendees included Eddie, Foghorn Leghorn, Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Tom and Jerry, Heckle and Jekyll, Chip and Dale, Felix the Cat, Herman and Catnip, Yacky Doodle, Mighty Mouse, Superman, Popeye, Olive Oyl, Bluto, Clarabelle Cow, Horace Horsecollar, the Seven Dwarfs, Baby Huey, and Casper the Friendly Ghost in cameo appearances. This scene was cut for pacing reasons at the storyboard stage, 37. Before finally agreeing on Who Framed Roger Rabbit as the film's title, working titles included Murder in Toontown, Toons, Dead Toons Don't Pay Bills, The Toontown Trial, Trouble in Toontown, and Eddie Goes to Toontown. Filming, Williams admitted he was openly disdainful of the Disney bureaucracy and refused to work in Los Angeles. Accommodating Williams and his animators, production moved to England where a studio, Walt Disney Animation UK, subsuming Richard Williams Animation, was created for this purpose. Located at the Forum, 7480 Camden Street, in Camden Town, London, while the live-action production was based at Elstree Studios. Disney and Spielberg also told Williams that in return for doing the film, they would help distribute his unfinished film, The Thief and the Cobbler. Supervising animators included Van Sitters, Dale Baer, Michael Peraza, Joe Ranft, Tom Cito, James Baxter, David Bowers, Andreas Deja, Mike Gabriel, Chris Jenkins, Phil Nibelink, Nick Ranieri, Simon Wells, and Bruce W. Smith. Williams and associate producer Don Hahn spearheaded the animation production. The animation production was split between Walt Disney Animation UK and a specialized unit in Los Angeles, set up by Walt Disney Feature Animation and supervised by Baer. The production budget continued to escalate while the shooting schedule ran longer than expected. When the budget reached $40 million, Disney CEO Michael Eisner seriously considered shutting down production, but studio chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg talked him out of it. Despite the budget escalating to over $50 million, Disney moved forward on production because they were enthusiastic to work with Spielberg. VistaVision cameras installed with motion control technology were used for the photography of the live-action scenes, which would be composited with animation. Rubber mannequins of Roger Rabbit, Baby Herman, and the Toon Patrol portrayed the animated characters during rehearsals to teach the actors where to look when acting with open-air and imaginative cartoon characters. Many of the live-action props held by cartoon characters were shot on set with the props either held by robotic arms or manipulated with strings, similar to a marionette. For example, a test was shot at ILM, where an actor playing the detective would climb down a fire escape and the rabbit is supposed to follow, and he knocks down some stacked boxes. Naturally, there would not be a rabbit during the test. So the camera would go down the fire escape, and the boxes would fall when a wire was pulled. The actor who played the voice of Roger, Charles Fleischer, insisted on wearing a Roger Rabbit costume while on the set to get into character. Filming began on November 2, 1986, and lasted for 7.5 months at Elstree Studios, with an additional month in Los Angeles and at Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, for blue screen effects of Toontown. Citation needed. The Dimco buildings in London were dressed as the fictional Acme factory. The entrance of Desilu Studios in Los Angeles served as the fictional Maroon Cartoon Studio lot. Animation and post-production. Music. See also Who Framed Roger Rabbit soundtrack. Regular Zemeckis collaborator Alan Silvestri composed the film score, performed by the London Symphony Orchestra, LSO, under the direction of Silvestri. Zemeckis joked that the British musicians could not keep up with Silvestri's jazz tempo. The performances of the music themes written for Jessica Rabbit were entirely improvised by a jazz combo performing with the LSO. The work of American composer Carl Stalling heavily influenced Silvestri's work on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The film's soundtrack was originally released by Buena Vista Records on June 22, 1988, and reissued on CD on April 16, 2002. On January 23, 2018, Intrada Records released a 3-CD set with the complete score, alternates, and a remastered version of the original 1988 album, plus music from 3 Roger Rabbit short films, composed and conducted by Bruce Broughton and James Horner. Mondo Records and Walt Disney Records reissued the original 1988 album on vinyl on September 17, 2021. The film features performances of Hungarian Rhapsody, Tony Anselmo and Mel Blanc, Why Don't You Do Right, Amy Irving, The Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, Charles Fleischer, and Smile, Darn Ya Smile, tune chorus. Release: Michael Eisner, then CEO, and Roy E. Disney, who was the vice chairman of the Walt Disney Company, felt the film was too risque with adult themes and sexual references. Eisner and Zemeckis disagreed over various elements of it, but since Zemeckis had final cut privilege, he refused to make alterations. Roy E. Disney, head of Walt Disney Feature Animation, along with studio chief Jeffrey Katzenberg, felt it was appropriate to release the film under the studio's adult-orientated Touchstone Pictures banner instead of the flagship Walt Disney Pictures banner. Box office. The film opened in the United States on June 22, 1988, grossing $11,226,239 in 145 theaters during its opening weekend. It was in first place at the U.S. box office. It was Disney's biggest opening weekend ever at the time of its release. It went on to gross $154,112 in the United States and Canada and $197,387,508 internationally, coming to a worldwide total of $351,500,000. At the time of release, it was the 20th highest-grossing film of all time. It was also the second highest-grossing film of 1988, behind only Rain Man. In the United Kingdom, the film also set a record opening for a Disney film. Home media. The film was first released on VHS on October 12, 1989, and on DVD on September 28, 1999. On March 25, 2003, Buena Vista Home Entertainment released it as a part of the Vista series line in a 2-disc collection with many extra features, including a documentary, Behind the Ears, The True Story of Roger Rabbit, a deleted scene in which a pig's head is tuned onto Eddie's, the 3 Roger Rabbit shorts, Tummy Trouble, Roller Coaster Rabbit, and Trail Mix-Up, as well as a booklet and interactive games. The only short on the 2003 VHS release was Tummy Trouble. The 2003 DVD release presents the film in full screen, 1.33:1 on Disc 1 and widescreen, 1.85:1 on Disc 2. On March 12, 2013, Disney released the film on Blu-ray and DVD Combo Pack Special Edition for the film's 25th anniversary. The film was also digitally restored for the release. Frame-by-frame digital restoration was done by Prasad Studios, removing dirt, tears, scratches, and other defects. Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment released the film on Ultra HD Blu-ray on December 7, 2021. Reception. Critical response. Who Framed Roger Rabbit received near-universal acclaim from critics, making Business Insider's Best Comedy Movies of All Time, according to critics list. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes gives the film an approval rating of 96% based on 76 reviews and an average rating of 8.5/10. The site's critical consensus reads, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an innovative and entertaining film that features a groundbreaking mix of live action and animation with a touching and original story to boot. Aggregator Metacritic has calculated a weighted average score of 83 out of 100 based on 15 reviews, indicating universal acclaim. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was placed on 43 critics' top 10 lists, third to only The Thin Blue Line and Bull Durham in 1988. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale. Richard Corliss, a writer for Time, said, "The opening scene upstages the movie that emerges from it." Corliss was mainly annoyed by the homages to the golden age of American animation. Chuck Jones made a rather scathing attack on the film in his book Chuck Jones Conversations. Among his complaints, Jones accused Zemeckis of robbing Richard Williams of any creative input and ruining the piano duel that both Williams and he storyboarded. I stopped off at a hot dog stand before the screening of Who Framed Roger Rabbit and ran into a couple of the other local movie critics. They said they were going to the same screening. I asked them what they'd heard about the film. They said they were going to see it for the second time in 2 days. That's the kind of word-of-mouth money can't buy. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit is the kind of movie that gets made once in a blue moon because it represents an immense challenge to the filmmakers. They have to make a good movie while inventing new technology at the same time. Like 2001, Close Encounters, and E.T., this movie is not only great entertainment, but a breakthrough in craftsmanship. The first film to convincingly combine real actors and animated cartoon characters in the same space in the same time and make it look real. I've never seen anything like it before. Roger Rabbit and his cartoon comrades cast real shadows. They shake the hands and grab the coats and rattle the teeth of real actors. They change size and dimension and perspective as they move through a scene, and the camera isn't locked down in one place to make it easy either. The camera in this movie moves around like it's in a 1940s thriller, and the cartoon characters look three-dimensional and seem to be occupying real space. In a way, what you feel when you see a movie like this is more than appreciation. It's gratitude. You know how easy it is to make dumb, no-brainer action movies, and how incredibly hard it is to make a movie like this, where every minute of screen time can take days or weeks of work by the animators. You're glad they went to the trouble. The movie is a collaboration between Disney Studios and Steven Spielberg. The direction is by Robert Back to the Future Zemeckis, and the animation is by Richard Williams. They made this a labor of love. How did they do it? First, they plotted every scene, shot by shot, so that they knew where the live actors would be and where the animated characters would be. Then they shot the live action, forcing actors such as Bob Hoskins, the star, to imagine himself in a world also inhabited by cartoons, or toons, as the movie calls them. Then they laboriously went through the movie frame by frame, drawing in the cartoon characters. This is not a computer job. Real, living animators did this by hand, and the effort shows in moments like the Zowie zoom shots, where the camera hurtles at Roger Rabbit and then careens away, with the rabbit changing size and perspective in every frame. But I'm making the movie sound like homework for a film class. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is sheer, enchanted entertainment from the first frame to the last. A joyous, giddy, goofy celebration of the kind of fun you can have with a movie camera. The film takes place in Hollywood in 1947, in a world where humans and toons exist side by side. The toons in the movie include not only new characters such as Roger Rabbit and his wife, the improbably pneumatic Jessica, but also established cartoon stars such as Bugs Bunny, Betty Boop, Dumbo, Mickey Mouse, and both of the great ducks Donald and Daffy. They do an act together as a piano duo. The toons live in Toontown, a completely animated world where the climax of the movie takes place. But most of the time, they hang out in a version of Hollywood that looks like it was borrowed from a 1940s Private Eye movie. The plot revolves around the murder of a gag gift mogul, and when Roger Rabbit is framed with the murder, Private Eye Hoskins gets caught in the middle of the action. As plots go, this one will be familiar to anyone who has ever seen a hard-boiled 40s crime movie, except, of course, for the toons. The movie is funny, but it's more than funny, it's exhilarating. It opens with what looks like a standard studio cartoon. Mother goes shopping and leaves Roger Rabbit to babysit her little brat, who immediately starts causing trouble. This cartoon itself, seen apart from the movie, is a masterpiece. I can't remember the last time I laughed as hard at an animated short. But then, when a stunt goes wrong and the cartoon Baby stalks off the set and lights a cigar and tells the human director to go to hell, we know we're in a new and special universe. The movie is filled with throwaway gags, inside jokes, one-liners, and little pokes at the screen images of its cartoon characters. It is also oddly convincing, not only because of the craft of the filmmakers, but also because Hoskins and the other live actors have found the right note for their interaction with the tunes. Instead of overreacting or playing up their emotions cartoon style, Hoskins and the others adopt a flat, realistic, matter-of-fact posture toward the tunes. They act as if they've been talking to animated rabbits for years. One tricky question is raised by a movie like this. Is it for kids, or adults, or both? I think it's intended as universal entertainment, like E.T. or The Wizard of Oz, aimed at all audiences. But I have a sneaky hunch that adults will appreciate it even more than kids, because they'll have a better appreciation of how difficult it was to make and how effortlessly it succeeds. Kids will like it too. But instead of being amazed at how they got the rabbits in with the humans, they'll be wondering what adults are doing walking around inside a cartoon. In recent memory, we've been treated to more 3D animation and CGI than ever before, with key characters coming to life thanks to mocap technology and painstaking detail from digital artists. Before this technological revolution, however, directors had to find different ways to push the envelope, and that's exactly what Robert Zemeckis did with Who Framed Roger Rabbit all the way back in 1988. Admittedly, I had never seen this movie until recently. Kids who grew up on Who Framed Roger Rabbit had no context for if this movie was good or bad, believable or utterly ridiculous. What surprised me most with my first viewing at the age of 28 in the year 2020 was how grounded this film is. Yes, you're brought into a world in which toons, animated characters from properties like Looney Tunes and Disney, coexist alongside our live-action real world. But that aside, everything in this movie could be really happening, or at least happening in the 1947 version of Hollywood that the film is set in. Private Detective Eddie Valiant, Bob Hoskins, has to cope with the fact that a toon murdered his brother while on the job, often turning to alcohol to cope with his feelings. And this is just the tip of the emotional iceberg that this movie throws at you. Roger Rabbit feels his marriage is failing when he sees pictures of his wife playing patty cake with Marvin Acme, who himself is killed by a falling safe the next day. This leads Eddie Valiant and Roger Rabbit on an investigation that reveals a much larger plot, unveiling not only the identity of the murderer, but the reading of a last will and testament, and a capitalistic plan to profit from the destruction of Toontown. I'm kind of ashamed to say I'd forgotten about this movie. It literally slipped my mind, and I haven't thought about it in years. It's only because I stumbled across it on Netflix that I remembered it and thought it would be a great way to keep the Mertmas entertained one day. You probably remember the story better than I do. The film opens with a maroon cartoon starring Roger Rabbit and Baby Herman, but unfortunately, Roger keeps flubbing a crucial scene to the exasperation of the director and cast. It turns out he can't keep his mind on his work because of troubles at home. To help Roger regain some focus, R.K. Maroon, the owner and head of Maroon Cartoons, hires washed-up alcoholic detective Eddie Valiant to tail Roger's wife to find out once and for all what's going on. There's only one problem. Eddie hates tunes. The opening of the film as a traditional cartoon, steeped in the influence of Tom and Jerry, is a great idea. And when the director, a cameoing Joel Silver, yells "cut" and the camera pulls back to reveal a physical set, it's just delightful. Although I'd seen it many times when it first came out and hit video, there were still details in the background I hadn't noticed in all those viewings. Delightful little touches showing just how much love went into making this picture. The crazy crossover world of late 1940s Hollywood and Toontown is wonderfully realized and feels alive, vibrant, and most importantly, real. Although often prone to putting the filmmaking technology ahead of the story, director Robert Zemeckis gets the balance here absolutely spot on, even managing to overcome some of the natural obstacles of having two-dimensional characters interact convincingly with a physical, three-dimensional environment. The variety and inventiveness of the special effects on show is amazing, and the results terrific. It's marginally more successful in placing cartoons into a real-world environment than placing the actors in a predominantly animated environment. But even when it doesn't quite hit the mark, the sheer joy and energy of the film will carry it through. The character design is terrific, and while Roger gets most of the screen time, it's the lasciviously drawn Jessica Rabbit who you'll remember most, thanks to a sultry and uncredited vocal performance by Kathleen Turner, and of course, the killer line, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way." What surprised me the most is how well this works as a noir detective story. The tune trappings and slapstick antics aside, the story of a grand real estate swindle, blackmail, betrayal, and revenge would work as the basis for a film starring any of the greats of the genre. Christopher Lloyd here is chilling as Judge Doom and dials back his usual craziness while simultaneously cranking up the menace. He really brings the villainy, and it's a good job his performance is often partially eclipsed by the zany chaos of the Weasel Gang. Otherwise, his performance might have overly darkened this family-friendly adventure. At the core of the whole affair, and holding it all together, is Bob Hoskins' Eddie Valiant. Hoskins plays the role with such world-weary sincerity you immediately buy into the more preposterous elements of the world on show. His gradual journey from embittered drunken tune hater to reinvigorated seeker of justice is perfectly judged, as is his rekindled romance with long-suffering sweetheart Dolores, Joanna Cassidy. Make no mistake, the flashy and still impressive special effects and cavalcade of cartoon cameos are great, but this picture belongs to Hoskins, and it's hard to think of anyone else being better in the role. What did the Mertmas make of it? He loved it. He's particularly keen on the character of Roger and his larking about, but he's hooked on the whole shebang. For him, it's the perfect mix of action, excitement, comedy, and cartoons. Having it available to stream just isn't enough, so we've had to go out and buy a copy on DVD. I can't believe there's no Blu-ray of this film, just to keep up with the demand for repeated watchings. There will never be a film like this one again. Warner Bros. And Disney allowing their characters on screen together makes it a rare event. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a celebration of classic American animation, both in the characters featured, but also in animation legend Richard Williams overseeing that part of the production. Watching it now as an adult, it is surprisingly straightforward. It follows the noir genre closely with its plot, while letting the tone be set by the zany premise. The story takes place over 2 days, and there's never a lull. The pacing keeps us moving along with the characters, leading up to a very memorable conclusion. In a world where humans and toons live side by side, we follow Eddie Valiant, Bob Hoskins, a private eye. He's watching Los Angeles go through many transformations in 1947, but nothing altered his life more than the murder of his brother and business partner. A new case calls into Eddie's lap. Studio owner R.K. Maroon believes his top star, Roger, Charles Fleischer, is down in the dumps because his wife, Jessica, Kathleen Turner, is having an affair. Eddie is hired to snap some photos from Maroon to show Roger, convince him to leave the broad, and get refocused on his acting career. Jessica is entertaining Marvin Acme, the owner of Toontown, in her dressing room at the club where she performs nightly. Eddie gets the snapshots, but then Acme turns up dead, and Roger is the top suspect. It's up to Eddie to get to the bottom of things, protecting Roger and avoiding the wrath of Judge Doom, Christopher Lloyd. Robert Zemeckis was a prominent film innovator at the time, starting with Back to the Future. This was his follow-up the year before Back to the Future Part 2 came out, and you can see him pushing the boundaries of practical effects. Animated characters interact with physical objects and people throughout this film, and for the most part, it is flawless. There were a couple moments where they tried to capture Jessica Rabbit in 3 dimensions in her introduction, where she looked distorted and strange, but overall, the effects are still incredible. There's never a point where I felt like Eddie wasn't actually talking to and interacting with Roger and the other toons. That's both a compliment to the animators, special effects people, and Hoskins' performance. The Daffy and Donald piano battle is one of those incredible feats, with the cartoon characters appearing to actually press the keys and cause mayhem and destruction on stage. When toons spit out water, it's real. When Baby Herman smokes a cigar, it's a real cigar with real smoke. The way Zemeckis and his special effects wizards hide the wires and tricks is masterful. Very quickly, we believe in this world. And that's something incredible that only a strong filmmaker can pull off. This isn't a kid's film, despite the colorful cartoon characters. I watched it as a kid, but didn't fully get all the innuendos and jokes. The obvious one is Jessica Rabbit and her over-sexualized persona. There's a lot of other visual gags and puns throughout. It feels like the kind of movie that, if they made it now, would either be sanitized to the point of being dull or made so vulgar that it was slapped with an R rating. There was something about the 1980s where they made these PG and PG-13 movies that knew just how to walk that line, still being quality without being so dirty that the family couldn't watch it. I greatly appreciated the simplicity of the story. It hits all the noir beats you might expect, but keeps us on our toes due to the toon element. There are some obvious nods to other noir works. Chinatown feels very obvious concerning Judge Doom's plans for Toontown, but there's a sprinkle of all sorts of similar films. Regarding Judge Doom, it was refreshing that the film never sought to give us a lengthy backstory on him. If this was made today, we'd have 30 minutes centered on Doom and how he became a judge, likely some spotlight scene where he gets a monologue. Instead, he's just the villain driving the plot forward. Lloyd doesn't have a hefty role, but you will remember every scene he is in. I don't think many films are better than Roger Rabbit when blending genres. The noir storyline and the silly comedy are balanced, so neither overshadows the other. There's no detached, ironic comedy here. Everything serves the story and shows how every actor is committed to their role. You can see that in Back to the Future, one of the best comedy-adventure movies ever made. When it's funny, it's hilarious, and it never hesitates when it needs to be serious and play up the darker elements. Roger Rabbit was part of an animation renaissance in the 1990s. It came just around The Little Mermaid's release, revitalizing Disney's animation department. Warner would also build up steam on television with programs like Batman the Animated Series and Animaniacs. American animation had been centered around selling toys and other products for a good decade or more. Cartoons were advertisements for these things. Roger Rabbit reminds us of an era where cartoon characters were funny toons people watched for a laugh. Budgets would go up, and animators who genuinely loved the form would get opportunities they had never had. It wouldn't last forever. By the early 2000s, we entered a new era of animation as digital tools became more advanced. It could be argued that the classic animation revival, sparked by Roger Rabbit, ended with the box office success of Toy Story. After that, US studios put more money into computer animation and mostly abandoned the cell animation format except for special occasions. This film is worth revisiting if it's been a while for you. It's such an extraordinary anomaly that we'll never see again. Disney tried with Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers a few years ago, but that had more allusions to famous animated characters outside of Disney's pool than Roger Rabbit gave us. Just one of the most unique neo-noir films ever made. At a time when the predominant male gaze in the world of film criticism is being questioned by Oscar-winning female actors and lowly denizens of Twitter alike, the erudite New Yorker critic Anthony Lane took more flack than he might have expected for an irreverent review of Pixar's innocent animated romp, The Incredibles 2. Or not so innocent, depending on who you believe. Lane poked fun at what he claimed was Pixar's overt sexualization of cartoon superhero mom Elastigirl, likening her to Anastasia Steele in the 50 Shades franchise, before joking that she'd prompt many an accompanying dad to rest his cooling soda firmly in his lap at the cinema. Some found Lane's exaggerated leering over a family comedy lewdly funny, others simply gross. What inspired less debate, however, was the question of whether Elastigirl, sleek in spike-heeled thigh boots and a rubber bodysuit and seemingly made curvier than in the 2004 original, was hot. Animated form notwithstanding, she kind of is, and Lane is far from the first person to note that. Brace yourself before typing the words Elastigirl porn into Google, is what I'm saying. The word game changer is wildly overused in Hollywood, but if it feels applicable to Roger Rabbit, that's because it's built entirely on puckish game playing to adults and children alike. You can feel the two-pronged impact of its winking, multi-leveled comedy in virtually every animated juggernaut of the modern era, from the low-hanging dirty punnery of the Shrek films to the plain LGBT subtext of Frozen to any amount of zippy in-jokes in, well, The Incredibles 2. We'll leave Elastigirl out of it for the moment. Yet where Zemeckis' film felt subversive in both its black comic doublespeak and formal invention, This kind of layering now feels calculated and committee-tweaked in studio family fare. Pixar's latest, written with a customary story supervisor and two story managers in attendance, is both slickly tooled and surprise-free. The non-traditional success of Zemeckis' film for the Mouse House triggered the resurgence of their markedly more traditional animation. The next year, the delightful but conventionally fairy tale-based The Little Mermaid was released and a renaissance was declared. Yet the experimental spirit of Who Framed Roger Rabbit was essentially nipped in the bud. Save for a few paler imitations in the Space Jam vein, few commercial filmmakers followed the lead of its sharp, mixed media approach, while more technological innovation was poured into making pure animation as digitally pristine as possible. Zemeckis himself, who would win an Oscar 6 years later for the galumphing conservative populism of Forrest Gump, but never topped this level of creative zest, wound up pioneering performance capture techniques in such otherwise drab, soulless animated features as The Polar Express and Beowulf. There have been quite a number of live-action animated hybrid movies before and after, but nothing has ever come close to the level of this film's polish and genius. This is by far the greatest hybrid flick ever produced, and it will probably stay at that top position for a long time to come. Why is that? Well, for one, the mixing of the two mediums is simply perfectly achieved here. I never at once questioned humans and toons interacting together for real, as the mixing is so well done thanks to amazing effects and a great eye for detail. Both mediums work in unison here, and we get many scenes mostly set in live action and mostly in animation, but when they are mixed, I've had the biggest blast. Let's first talk about this animation. It's brilliant. It perfectly evokes the classic nature of those timeless cartoons of the 30s to 50s period, owing to tremendous character designs and a polished, colorful nature to it. It looks nostalgic, endearing, and immensely satisfactory in every possible way. But the live-action part ain't shabby itself. On the contrary, this is where the movie contrasted the familial cartoon side with a truly atmospheric adult tone. I am, of course, talking about its terrific neo-noir approach and execution, which is so great that it might be the best neo-noir film out there, unexpectedly so. I loved the darker look to the film, contrasted so well with the brighter cartoon part of the story. And it's simply incredibly dark as a story, too, with that one sequence with a tune being tortured and murdered being chilling to the bone. That scene always gets to me emotionally, and it fucks me up in a way that I could never expect from such a film. Let's finally talk about each and every character here. Eddie Valiant is your typical grouchy, overly serious noir-type guy with a very sad backstory that made him so angry and empty. I found that backstory the most emotional part of the film, and it really worked both in emotion and characterization. Bob Hoskins was phenomenal in the role too, and perfectly cast. Christopher Lloyd is so damn good as the maniacal, crazy, over-the-top villain Judge Doom. He's the best kind of cartoony villain who really makes an impact on the story. He's genuinely creepy and capable of bringing it, and I really appreciated that about him. But the tunes themselves are also absolutely awesome. Roger Rabbit himself is your standard classic cartoon character with his energetic persona and lispy speaking. He's not only very endearing, but also funny at times with his obsession with his girlfriend and his many fears. The relationship between Eddie and himself is just great and wonderful in every way. As for Jessica Rabbit, I was amused by the two's romance as she seemed to genuinely care for the rabbit. That romance made the movie hilarious and just iconic. Even though I prefer the central relationship between Roger and Eddie, I still loved the interactions between these two, even though they were fewer in screen time. She is not only ridiculously sexy, but a genuinely cool and likable character, which was also important. The film is famous for featuring a bunch of iconic Warner Bros. As well as Disney classic characters. The sequence between Daffy Duck and Donald Duck is so funny, while the scene with Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny steals the show how funny and perfectly in character it is, both in voices and catchphrases. I also loved seeing Betty Boop. She was so cute. Tweety is hilarious per usual, and Pinocchio, Dumbo, Three Little Pigs, and so on and so forth. It was just lovely seeing all of them here, and the references to Acme Corporation I found brilliant, and it was well woven into the story too. Who Framed Roger Rabbit not only looks great, but it sounds amazing too, with a terrific score and awesome sound effects, cartoony and fun. The film has a perfect runtime for its story, and it's so engaging throughout that it flies by. The dialogue is fantastic. The sexual violent nature to the film made it suitable for adults, while the cartoony side is perfect for kids and animation enthusiasts. The humor's great too, and it's simply a hugely iconic, memorable movie. Williams explained that Zemeckis wanted three things: Disney articulation, i.e. believability, weight, skill of movement, and sincerity when we needed it. Warner Brothers characters, because they're seer, they do more interesting things, and Aver, humor. As a result, the film's tunes will do anything for laugh, making some scenes feel almost chaotic with their impulsive, rambunctious behavior that also looks tactile. The effect even drives the story. When Valiant finds himself handcuffed to Roger, who can only free himself when it's funny at the moment, when Valiant struggles to saw himself free tunes. Roger, above all, behave as though they're aware of an audience outside of the diagosis, and they calibrate their action to entertain that audience. When Valiant drives into Toontown, the scenery and characters seem to be performing an ever-playing cycle of brightly colored comic routines as though their very existence derives meaning from the performer-audience relationship, and less as a response to Valiant or anyone inside the diagosis. When Valiant first steps onto the maroon cartoon, backlit we see familiar faces: Dumbo, Michigan Jade Frog, the Brooms from Fantasia, et all interacting with their surroundings, and obligatory passage for any picture with that. A scene on a studio a lot, performing sight gags in the background. Who are these performances for other than the audience, and not even the spectators in the film, but the viewer of Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Curiously, there is no suggestion that this state represents forced servitude or that the tune is locked inside a one-way arrangement of indentured servitude or slavery to the humans in the diagosis, the film makes no mention of the tun's creators or how they live and inhabit the three-dimensional plane. Though the formula of dip, a substance designed to kill tunes, includes chemicals typically used as paint thinner, suggesting the tunes have been painted looking at on-screen evidence. The tune appears to live for us, while the film views most of them as innocents. The tune's status as a wholesome, entertainment-driven species creates a sharp contrast to the noir story elements in a conspiracy resembling the plot of Chinatown. 1974, the resident villain Judge Doom Christopher Lloyd uses a company called Cloverleaf to buy Los Angeles' public transit trolley system. Pacific Electric Railway, his elaborate scheme also, entails framing Roger for murder to acquire ownership of Toontown from Marvin, Acme Stubby Kaye, the man playing Patty caked with Roger's wife, the voluptuous Jessica Rabbit, voiced by Kathleen Turner. Doom's master plan is to eventually own and wipe out Toontown, replacing it with a freeway to Pasadena lined with a string of gas stations, inexpensive motels, restaurants that serve rapidly prepared food. The scheme recalls the vast conspiracy at the intersection of water irrigation, land development, politics, and power in Chinatown. Like that film, the conspiracy in Who Framed Roger Rabbit has some bearing in historical fact. General Motors and other automobile companies purchased the streetcar companies only to dissolve them and ensure their own industry. In any case, the film's Neo war script went through several drafts before settling on this conflict, some with Baby Herman as the villainous mastermind, others with Jessica Rabbit as the culprit. Regardless of the many revisions, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a tightly structured classical Norse script. Every line of dialogue sets up a subsequent plot detail or comic reward. Every detail on the screen has a payoff later in the film. Within its more structure, the script also creates distinct characters. Is the sprightly, tender-hearted comic relief. Doom is a terrifying figure of authority, garbed in black and disguised to hide the monstrous, murderous, high-pitched tune. Underneath the most famous of them is Jessica Rabbit, the self-aware red herring and fatal. "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way," she remarks. Jessica remains the focus of much analysis about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, owing to her unconventional representation as a two-dimensional sex spot who draws the eyes of tunes and humans alike. She's an amalgam of Marilyn Monroe's curves, Veronica Lake's peekaboo hairstyle, Lauren Ball's sultry voice, and Rita Hayworth's duplicity in The Lady from Shanghai 1947. All of these influences have been contained in a character design inspired by the titular character in Tex Avery's Red Hot Riding Hood 1943. Alternatively, Avery's Little Rural Red Riding Hood 1949 offers the origins of her frightening counterpart Lena Hyena, the man-crazy tune who plants a smooch on Valiant in Toontown. But after years of endless discussion about Jessica Rabbit's sex appeal, her role in the film's success has been overestimated. Instead, consider Hoskins' presence as Valiant, the unlikely down-on-his-luck hero, whose tentative romance with the non-nonsense bartender Dolores Joanna Cassidy proves endearing title. At the U.S. box office, the contemporary critical response to Who Framed Roger Rabbit was mixed and usually accompanied by discussions about the production's technical accomplishment and entertainment value, followed by a entrenched analysis of how the film handles the interplay between the human and toon worlds. Roger Ebert celebrated its story and technique as not only great entertainment A&M, but a breakthrough in craftsmanship in the New York Times' Janet Maslin praised how Zemeckis takes thrilling steps into another dimension that must be seen to be believed. John Simon of the National Review disagreed, calling the production a film for technology's sake, and so ultimately a case of the tail wagging the rabbit. Some dismissed the appeal of more than inspired silliness. Critics also noted the curious sex appeal of Jessica Rabbit, such as Jonathan Rosenbaum in the Chicago Reader, who underlined how her quality of bestiality and fetishism muddled the character in a strange blend of fantasies, a reference to Jessica's declaration to Roger. "I've loved you more than any woman's ever loved a rabbit." Writers also observed the sociological dynamics between the species, making lofty comparisons to issues of race, Los Angeles Daily News critic Michael Healy wrote, "The way humans talk about tunes is derived from the way prejudiced whites talk about blacks, carefree fools, simpletons, happy-go-lucky stereotypes. Before the civil rights movement, one doesn't have to be overly sensitive for this conceit to make one's skin crawl in." His book about Zemeckis, Norman Kagan, furthers this notion, suggesting the human characters see nothing wrong with segregation, and the film amounts to history's nightmare, transformed by Hollywood into jokey entertainment. Arguments against the film's treatment of tunes and theories about whether they represent marginalized cultures are not entirely unfounded. Ghettoized in Toontown, where they remain desperate for approval and desperate for a laugh. The tunes could represent any non-white race, forced to endure institutionalized racism or racial violence throughout U.S. history. Worse, tunes deserve less than human treatment in the eyes of the law, evidenced when Judge Doom slowly submerges a tune shoe in a vat of Dip Valiant, and some cops watch horrified as the puppy-like shoe melts in a chemical bath, screaming for its life, with apparently no recourse to object. But theories about the film as a metaphor for race in America ignore the finale's details. Valiant endeavor to stop Judge Doom's plan to eliminate Toontown and build a freeway is not about preserving segregation or keeping tunes and humans separate. Rather, it's about preventing Doom from wiping out Toontown altogether. The film does not end with an edict that requires all tunes to live inside of Toontown's borders. Amsville gives the tunes ownership of their own municipality, though they're free to continue living and working outside its skank walls. What the film captures is Valiant's willingness, and thus our own, to see the tunes as living beings worthy of love, life, and self-governance, thus revealing the humanity that he has kept at bay with Boo. If the film sees the cow tunes as a marginalized race, the film is anti-segregation. It ends with the wall between Toontown and Los Angeles crumbling, and hopes for their rights alongside human beings. However, the wall imagery suggests a closer resemblance to contemporary Cold War politics and the Berlin Wall's eventual destruction to bring two communities closer together. The reviews of Who Framed Roger Rabbit also anticipate how, for the remainder of his career, Zemeckis would be saddled with the label of a technophile, more interested in experimenting with the cinematic apparatus than telling a good story. If this is true, it's certainly more evident in his 21st century work. Examples from the first half of his career regularly feature his authorial signatures, including his penchant for broad humor and a healthy skepticism about the goodness of humanity and its institutions. These qualities remain unmistakable in I Want to Hold Your Hand. Used Cars, Death Becomes Her, 1992 Forrest Gump, 1994 Contact, 1997 and Allied, 2016. Among these examples, Who Framed Roger Rabbit pushes technology furthest, contains unabashedly cartoonish humor, draws its morality from the ambiguities of film noir, and questions the integrity of law enforcement and corporate greed. His later experiments with animation and performance captured in The Polar Express, 2004, both 2007, A Christmas Carol, 2009, and Welcome to Marwen, 2018, often result in visually disappointing outcomes that have little to say about the world and feature technology that overwhelms the story. Even his relatively straightforward films such as Castaway, 2000 and Flight 2012 offer visual trickery of another kind. Bravado plane crash sequences in both quicken the pulse, yet the central performances by Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, respectively, deliver a different type of special effect. But few examples from his career apart from Allied or What Lies Beneath 2000 prove as cynical about systems of authority as Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Watching the film more than 30 years after its release, Who Framed Roger Rabbit's pure energy, mistrust of the system, and countless delights almost outshine how it revolutionized the mixture of animated characters in the human world from a historical outlook. What remains so fascinating is how even though successors like Space Jam 1996, Looney Tunes Back in Action 2003, or Tom and Jerry 2021 are aided by less strenuous computer technology, the result has never been as seamless, kick, or entertaining as Zeus Breakthrough. The film is not merely the first of a kind, but a true original, occasionally imitated but never matched, unlike other hollow attempts to capitalize on intellectual property with the convergence of live action and animation. Who Framed Roger Rabbit feels like a work of passion and craft. Zemeckis applies an unlikely personal touch that leaves this big-budget studio project feeling like an extension of his creative mishap, cynical and technology. Obsessed sensibilities contained in the film's commingling of kooky humor, formal, bravado, and portrait of America's corrupt institutions resides a familiar set of traits found throughout the director's body of work. Without Seuss at the helm, the film may have felt engineered. Instead, it feels inspired. This film, directed by Robert Zemeckis, screenplay by Jeffrey Price Peter, is Seaman, produced by Frank Marshall, Robert W.S., starring Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd Charles for Stubby, Kaye, Joanna Cassidy, cinematography Dean Cundy, edited by Arthur, music by Alan Silvestri, production companies Touchstone Pictures, Amblin Entertainment, Silver Screen Partners 3, distributed by Buena Vista Pictures. Distribution release dates June 21st, 1988 in New York City, June 22nd, 1988 in United States. Running time 104 minutes. Country: United States. Language: English. Budget $50.6 million. Box office $300.833.